The gravel crunched under his tires at 3 in the morning. I knew that sound, the hesitant approach of someone who didn't want to be heard. At 64, my hearing had sharpened in inverse proportion to my sight, and I was awake before Justin even cut the engine. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. I stood at the kitchen window, watching my son emerge from his sedan like a ghost returning to haunt his childhood home. The porch light caught his face for just a moment, and what I saw there made my chest tighten. Fear. Raw, unfiltered fear in the eyes of a man who'd spent 38 years convinced he was invincible. He didn't knock. The spare key I'd kept hidden under the ceramic frog still worked, and he slipped inside with the practiced quiet of someone running from something. Or someone. Mom. His voice cracked when he found me standing there in my robe. I didn't mean to wake you. You didn't. I switched on the small lamp by the breakfast nook, keeping the light low, though I suspect that was your intention anyway. Justin set down a single duffel bag, the kind you pack when you're leaving in a hurry and don't plan on going back. His clothes were expensive but rumpled, his hair uncombed. This wasn't the polished attorney who'd argued cases in front of state judges. This was my son, stripped of his armor. Coffee? I asked. Because that's what mothers do. We offer comfort in porcelain cups. Mom, listen to me. He grabbed my wrist, gentle but urgent. Do not tell anyone I'm here. Not Diane, not Pastor Wilson, not your book club ladies. No one can know. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller. Where's Rachel? His jaw tightened at the mention of his wife. She left. 2 weeks ago. Took Emma to her mother's place in Connecticut. Your daughter is safer away from me right now. He released my wrist and ran both hands through his hair. I can't explain everything tonight, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that? I studied his face in the dim light. The same face I'd kissed goodnight for 18 years. The same eyes that had looked up at me from a hospital blanket when he was hours old. But there were new lines there now, carved by stress I couldn't yet name. I've trusted you since the day you were born, I said quietly. I'm not stopping now. Relief flooded his features, but it was temporary. He glanced toward the window as if expecting someone to peer through the glass. I need to sleep. Just a few hours. We'll talk in the morning. He climbed the stairs to his old bedroom, and I heard the door close. Lock. I stood in my kitchen for a long time after that, watching the coffee maker drip and wondering what kind of trouble required a man to hide from his own life. Sleep didn't come for me that night. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table as dawn crept across my 10 acres of farmland, watching the empty road that led to my property. The house had been in my family for 40 years, since my late husband Thomas and I had bought it with dreams of raising children in wide open spaces. Those children were grown now, scattered like seeds on the wind. Justin in Philadelphia, my daughter Diane in Boston, both successful, both distant. And now one of them was upstairs, running from something he wouldn't name. The morning revealed itself in shades of gray and amber. I made breakfast. Eggs, toast, the simple foods that had sustained my family through decades. Justin emerged around 8, looking marginally better but no less haunted. Thank you, he said, sitting down without prompting. For not asking questions. Oh, I have questions. I slid a plate in front of him. I'm just giving you time to find answers. He ate mechanically, his eyes constantly drifting to the windows. I'd seen this behavior before, in animals that sensed predators. The recognition chilled me. Justin, what happened? He set down his fork carefully, precisely, the way he did everything when he was working up courage. Rachel thinks I did something terrible, and she's not the only one. What do they think you did? Before he could answer, gravel crunched again. We both froze. A black sedan, not Justin's, rolled slowly up the driveway, and my son went pale. Get away from the window, he whispered. This is my house. But I stepped back anyway, watching as a man in a gray suit emerged from the vehicle. He was perhaps 50, with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Law enforcement, I thought. Or worse. The doorbell rang. Justin shook his head frantically, but I was already moving. Whatever storm had followed my son here, hiding in the shadows wouldn't make it pass. I opened the door 6 inches, keeping my body in the gap, Can I help you? The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Mrs. Bertha Hartwell? That's correct. My name is Lewis Sutton. I'm an investigator with Meridian Associates. He produced a business card, which I didn't take. I'm looking for Justin Hartwell. We have information that suggests he might be in the area. My son lives in Philadelphia. Yes, ma'am. I'm aware. But his apartment has been vacant for 3 days, and his wife is quite concerned about his whereabouts. Sutton's gaze drifted past me, scanning what little of the interior he could see. Would you mind if I came in? Just to talk? I would mind, actually. It's early, and I wasn't expecting visitors. His smile thinned. Mrs. Hartwell, I should be frank with you. Your son is wanted for questioning in connection with a very serious matter. A young woman named Cassandra Mills was found dead in her apartment last week. Justin was her attorney, and evidence suggests he may have been the last person to see her alive. The words hit like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. That's absurd. Perhaps. But there are witnesses who saw his car near her building the night she died. Security footage placing him in the lobby. And her phone records show multiple calls between them in the days before her death. He paused, letting that sink in. Ma'am, you should know who he's hiding from. This isn't just about divorce proceedings or professional misconduct. The district attorney is building a murder case. Murder. The word hung in the air between us like smoke. If Justin contacts you, Sutton continued, his voice dropping to something that might have been sympathy, you should convince him to turn himself in, for his own safety and yours. People who run from this kind of accusation rarely fare well in the long term. I'll keep that in mind. My hand tightened on the doorframe. Now, if you'll excuse me, one more thing. He reached into his jacket, and I tensed, but he only produced a photograph. Do you recognize this woman? The picture showed a young blonde, maybe 28, with bright eyes and an easy smile. Pretty, in an understated way. I'd never seen her before in my life. No, I said truthfully. That's Cassandra Mills. She was a client of your son's firm. She came to him about a whistleblower case, said she'd uncovered fraud at her company. Millions of dollars in embezzled funds. Sutton tucked the photo away. She was going to testify, and now she's dead, and your son has vanished. He handed me his business card, forcing it into my hand this time. Think about what I said, Mrs. Hartwell. Think about what kind of man would run instead of face justice. I watched him return to his car, watched him sit there for a moment studying my house before finally pulling away. Only when his sedan disappeared down the road did I close the door and turn to find Justin standing in the hallway, his face ashen. Is it true? I asked quietly. That she's dead? Yes. He slumped against the wall. That I killed her? Mom? I swear on Dad's grave, no. I didn't hurt her. I wouldn't. Then why are you running? Because someone is setting me up, and they've done a damn good job of it. He met my eyes, and I saw desperation there. Everything he said, the security footage, the phone records, my car near her building, it's all real. But I wasn't there that night. I couldn't have been, and no one believes me. I moved to the living room window, watching the empty road. Louis Sutton was gone, but he'd be back. Men like that always came back. Tell me everything, I said. Start at the beginning, and don't leave anything out. Justin sank onto the couch where he'd spent countless childhood evenings and began to speak. As his story unfolded, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet, felt the careful order of my quiet life begin to crack and reform into something darker, more dangerous. My son was being framed for murder, and somehow, impossibly, I was the only person who could help him prove it. The question was how, and by whom, and why someone would go to such elaborate lengths to destroy an attorney in Philadelphia who specialized in corporate fraud cases. Unless, I realized with growing dread, Cassandra Mills had uncovered something worth killing for, and Justin had become a liability the moment he'd agreed to represent her. Outside, clouds gathered on the horizon. A storm was coming, in more ways than one, and I, Bertha Hartwell, grandmother and retired librarian, was standing directly in its path. Justin talked for 2 hours straight. I sat across from him in my reading chair, the one Thomas had given me on our 20th anniversary. and listened to a story that grew more troubling with each detail. Cassandra Mills had worked for Vertex Solutions, a mid-sized pharmaceutical supply company based in Philadelphia. She'd discovered irregularities in their financial reports, payments to shell companies, inflated inventory costs, missing shipments that had supposedly been delivered. Classic embezzlement, but on a massive scale. $15 million over 3 years. "She came to me 6 weeks ago," Justin said, his coffee long since cold. Scared out of her mind. She'd already gone to her supervisor, and the next day her access credentials were suspended. They called it a routine security review, but she knew better. So she needed a lawyer. She needed someone who specialized in whistleblower protection. That's my niche. Corporate fraud cases, employee protection, wrongful termination. He stood and paced to the window, checking the road again. I took her case, filed the preliminary paperwork, set up meetings with federal investigators. And then she started getting paranoid. Thought someone was following her. Her apartment was broken into. Nothing stolen, but things had been moved. Someone had gone through her files. He turned to face me. I told her to go to the police. She refused, said the company had connections, that going public would only make her a target. She was right, apparently. Justin's expression darkened. 3 days before she died, she called me at midnight, said she had proof, documents that would guarantee federal charges against Vertex's executives. She wanted to meet the next morning to hand them over. Did you meet her? Yes, at a coffee shop downtown. She gave me a flash drive and told me not to look at it until she said so. She wanted to make copies first, hide them somewhere safe. He rubbed his face. I never saw her alive again. And the flash drive? Gone. My office was broken into 2 days after her death. They took my computer, my files, and the flash drive from my locked desk drawer. His voice dropped. They left everything else, just took the case materials. I absorbed this slowly, piecing together the implications. So, someone killed Cassandra Mills to prevent her from testifying. And now they're framing you to discredit any evidence that might surface. That's my theory. But here's the problem. I can't prove it. The security footage shows someone who looks like me entering Cassandra's building. My car was photographed nearby. My phone records show calls to her number. He met my eyes. Mom, I think someone cloned my phone, used my car while I was in court. They've constructed a perfect frame. Who would have the resources for that? Vertex Solutions has a $30 million annual budget. If their executives are facing federal charges and prison time, they'd spend every penny to avoid it. Before I could respond, my phone rang. The landline, not my cell. Only family had that number. Don't answer it, Justin said immediately. But I was already moving. The caller ID showed Diane's number, my daughter calling from Boston. Ignoring her would only raise suspicions. Hello. Mom, thank goodness. Diane's voice was tight with stress. Have you heard from Justin? I hesitated for half a second too long. Why would I hear from Justin? Because Rachel called me in tears yesterday. Said he's been missing for 3 days, won't answer his phone, and there are police asking questions about some dead woman. Diane's tone sharpened. Mom, is he there? Diane, I can hear it in your voice. He's there, isn't he? Papers rustled in the background. Mom, listen to me. Rachel said the police think he killed someone, his own client. If he's with you, you need to call the authorities immediately. That's not going to happen. Excuse me? My daughter's voice could freeze water when she wanted it to. Mom, you can't harbor a fugitive. Do you understand the legal implications? You could be charged as an accessory. Your brother is innocent. You don't know that. None of us know that. Diane exhaled sharply. Look, I'm catching a flight this afternoon. I'll be there by evening. We need to talk about this as a family. Diane, that's not necessary. It's already done. I've booked the ticket. She paused. And Mom, don't let him leave before I get there. This is serious. More serious than you realize. The line went dead. I set the phone down carefully, aware of Justin watching from the doorway. She's coming, I said unnecessarily. I heard. He ran a hand through his hair. She'll try to convince you to turn me in. She can try all she likes. But even as I said it, doubt crept in. Diane was a corporate lawyer herself, hardwired to follow procedure and respect institutional authority. She'd never understand why Justin was running instead of cooperating with the investigation, and she certainly wouldn't approve of me helping him hide. The morning wore on. I made lunch, sandwiches neither of us had appetite for, and tried to think strategically. If Justin was being framed, there had to be evidence somewhere. Loose threads we could pull. The people at Vertex, I said. The ones who would have known about Cassandra's investigation. Give me names. Justin looked up from his untouched plate. Why? Because if someone went to this much trouble to frame you, they left tracks. They had to. Nobody's perfect. I pulled out a notepad from the kitchen drawer, the same one where I'd recorded recipes and grocery lists for decades. Now it would serve a different purpose. Names, positions, and what Cassandra told you about each of them. He studied me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his expression. Recognition, maybe. Or hope. Robert Kensington, he began. CEO. 58, been with the company since its founding. Cassandra said he signed off on all the major contracts, including the suspicious ones. I wrote it down. Who else? Patricia Wolfe, CFO. She would have processed the payments to the shell companies. And James Farrell, head of logistics. He handled the inventory reports that showed the missing shipments. 3 names. 3 people who stood to lose everything if Cassandra's evidence went public. Did Cassandra mention anyone specifically? Anyone who seemed more threatening than the others? Justin frowned, thinking. She was most afraid of Farrell. Said he had a temper, that he'd cornered her in the parking garage once and told her to stop asking questions. That was right before she came to me. James Farrell. I circled the name twice. What else do you know about him? Not much. Former military, I think. Cassandra mentioned he had connections, people he knew from his service days. Justin stood abruptly. Mom, what are you planning? I'm planning to find out who killed Cassandra Mills. Absolutely not. He moved toward me, his voice rising. These people are dangerous. They've already killed once, which is exactly why we can't sit here waiting for them to perfect their frame. I met his eyes steadily. You said you can't prove your innocence through official channels. So we find another way. By doing what? Playing amateur detective? Mom, you're 64 years old. I'm 64 years old and I have all my faculties. Thank you very much. I stood to face him. I also have something you don't have right now. Freedom of movement. Nobody's looking for me. Nobody suspects me. That'll change the moment you start poking around in this. Then I'll be careful. We stared at each other across the kitchen table, and I saw the war playing out behind his eyes. He wanted to protect me, to keep me safely removed from the danger he'd brought to my door. But he also knew I was right. Hiding accomplished nothing. If we wanted the truth, we'd have to dig for it. Promise me you'll be careful, he finally said. I promise. It was a lie, and we both knew it. Careful meant safe, and safe meant slow. We didn't have time for either. That afternoon, while Justin slept fitfully upstairs, I did what retired librarians do best. I researched. The public library might have been a 40-minute drive away, but I had something better, a laptop and an internet connection. I started with Vertex Solutions, pulling up their corporate website, their financial disclosures, news articles mentioning the company. On the surface, everything looked legitimate. A successful pharmaceutical supply company with contracts across 3 states, annual revenues in the hundreds of millions. But surfaces could deceive. I dug deeper, searching for the shell companies Cassandra had supposedly identified. It took 3 hours and more false starts than I cared to count, but eventually I found them. Phoenix Medical Supplies, Crescent Logistics, Harbinger Distribution, all 3 registered to addresses that didn't exist. All 3 showing Vertex Solutions as their primary client. $15 million flowing to ghost companies over 3 years. And nobody had noticed until a 28-year-old accountant started asking questions. I was printing out the company registrations when I heard a car door slam outside. My heart jumped. Too early for Diane's flight. But when I looked through the window, I saw Louis Sutton climbing out of his black sedan. Justin, I called softly. We have company. He appeared at the top of the stairs, tense as a wire. Sutton? Yes. Don't answer the door. But the investigator didn't knock. Instead, he walked slowly around the perimeter of my property, his phone to his ear, occasionally stopping to photograph the house from different angles. He was building a case, documenting Justin's probable location. After 10 minutes, he returned to his car. But he didn't leave. He just sat there, engine running, watching my house like a cat watching a mouse hole. "He's not going anywhere," Justin said from beside me. "He's staking us out. Then he'll be disappointed. I'm not hiding you in the cellar." I gathered my printed documents and tucked them into a folder. "And I have errands to run. Mom, I'm not a prisoner in my own home. I found my purse and car keys. Mr. Sutton can photograph my leaving all he wants. I'm a private citizen going about my business." "Where are you going?" "To the library, where I spent 30 years of my professional life and where they keep excellent records on corporate filings and business registrations." I paused at the door. "Lock this behind me. Don't answer if anyone knocks. And Justin, delete your call history with Cassandra from your phone. If Sutton gets a warrant, I want him finding nothing. He already has phone records. From the provider, yes, but not the content of your calls and not your text messages. Delete everything. Now." I left before he could argue further, walking past Louis Sutton's sedan with my head high. He watched me go, but he didn't follow. Not yet. He wanted Justin, not a woman old enough to be his mother running innocuous errands. His mistake. The library welcomed me like an old friend. I'd retired 3 years ago, but the head librarian, Patricia Morrison, who'd been my assistant for a decade, greeted me with genuine warmth. "Bertha, what brings you by?" "Research project," I said truthfully. "I need access to the business registry database and any archived news articles about a company called Vertex Solutions." Patricia didn't question it. Librarians understood that research was its own justification. I spent 2 hours in the reference room, compiling everything I could find on Vertex Solutions and its executives. Robert Kensington had been investigated twice by the SEC for questionable business practices, but nothing had stuck. Patricia Wolfe had worked for 3 different companies that had been charged with financial fraud, though she'd never been personally implicated. And James Farrell? James Farrell had no digital footprint before 2018. Before that, nothing. No social media, no previous employment, no public records. It was as if he'd materialized out of thin air 7 years ago and immediately been hired as head of logistics for a pharmaceutical supply company. People didn't just appear. They came from somewhere. I made copies of everything, tucked them into my bag, and was preparing to leave when my phone buzzed. A text from Diane. Landed early. At the house in 20 minutes. "We need to talk." 20 minutes. Barely enough time to get home, and Louis Sutton was probably still watching. My daughter was walking into a situation she didn't understand, with an investigator documenting everyone who came and went from my property. I texted back, "Meet me at Rosewood Diner instead. Alone." Her response came immediately. "Why?" "Because your brother is innocent, and I can prove it. But not with witnesses watching." A long pause then. "This better be good, Mom." I drove to the Rosewood Diner and waited. Through the window, I saw Diane's rental car pull into the lot, saw my daughter emerge looking every inch the successful attorney in her tailored suit and perfect posture. She slid into the booth across from me with an expression that promised an interrogation. "Talk," she said simply. So I did. I laid out everything Justin had told me, everything I'd found in my research, and watched my daughter's face shift from skepticism to concentration to something that might have been grudging acceptance. "This is circumstantial," she said finally. "None of this proves Justin is innocent, but it proves someone had motive to frame him. Someone with resources and connections." I leaned forward. "Diane, your brother needs our help." "Our help? Mom, we're not investigators. We're not equipped. We're his family. That makes us the only people he can trust." Diane stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the war playing out in her eyes. Professional training versus family loyalty. Legal caution versus maternal instinct. Finally, she said, "If we do this, and I'm not saying we are, we do it smart. No unnecessary risks. No vigilante justice. She pulled out her own notepad. And we start by figuring out who else wanted Cassandra Mills dead. Relief flooded through me, warm as summer rain. Agreed. But Mom? If we find evidence that Justin is guilty, we turn him in. No exceptions. Fair enough. I didn't mention that I already knew what we'd find. My son was innocent. And I would prove it, even if it meant facing down corporate executives, private investigators, and my own daughter's doubts. The waitress came over, and I ordered coffee. Diane did the same. So, she said, studying my folder of documents, where do we start? I smiled grimly. We start with James Farrell and figure out why a man with no past is so desperate to bury the present. We returned to my house after dark, taking separate cars and different routes. Louis Sutton's sedan was gone, but I didn't trust the absence. Men like him didn't give up. They just changed tactics. Justin met us at the door, his relief at seeing Diane palpable but wary. My children hadn't spoken in months. Not since a disagreement over their father's estate that had left wounds neither seemed willing to heal. You came, Justin said simply. Mom made a compelling case. Diane set her briefcase on the kitchen table with the precision of someone preparing for battle. But I'm here as your attorney, not your sister. There's a difference. I'll take what I can get. The temperature in the room could have frozen mercury. I intervened before old resentments could derail us. We have work to do, I said firmly. Diane, show him what we found. She pulled out her laptop and began outlining the shell companies, the financial discrepancies, the suspicious gaps in James Farrell's history. Justin listened with the intensity of a man watching his life being dissected and reassembled. This is good, he said when she finished. But it's still not enough. We need something concrete. Something that directly links Farrell to Cassandra's murder. Agreed. Diane tapped her pen against her notepad. Which means we need access to Vertex Solutions' internal records. And that's not happening without a warrant, which requires probable cause, which we don't have. Actually, I said slowly, we might have another option. They both turned to me. Cassandra told you she was making copies of the evidence, hiding them somewhere safe. I looked at Justin. Where would a frightened woman hide something she didn't want found? I don't know. She never said. But she must have mentioned something. A detail. A comment. Think, Justin. He closed his eyes, and I watched him sift through memories. She talked about her grandmother once, said she was the only family member who believed her, who didn't think she was crazy for risking her career over this. His eyes opened. She mentioned visiting her grandmother's house in New Jersey, said it felt like the only safe place left. Do you have an address? No, but... He pulled out his phone, then hesitated. My phone might be compromised. They could be tracking it. Diane wordlessly handed him hers. Use mine. The number? Justin scrolled through his mental contacts and dialed. The conversation was brief, one-sided, and ended with him writing down an address in Trenton. Her grandmother, Margaret Mills. She's 82, lives alone. He set down the phone. I told her I was a colleague of Cassandra's, that I needed to discuss some work matters. She agreed to meet tomorrow afternoon. Good. I stood. We'll drive down first thing in the morning. We? Justin shook his head. Mom, no. You've done enough. I'm coming. Diane's voice cut through his objection. If there's evidence, we need to document it properly. Chain of custody matters, especially if this goes to trial. And I'm coming, I added. Because an 82-year-old woman is more likely to trust a grandmother than two attorneys showing up on her doorstep asking questions about her dead granddaughter. Justin started to argue, then seemed to recognize the futility. Fine. But we need to be smart about this. If Sutton is watching, he's watching for you, not us. Diane closed her laptop. Mom and I will go. You stay here. Keep a low profile. Absolutely not. It's not negotiable. My daughter's tone left no room for debate. You're a fugitive, Justin. Every minute you're exposed increases the risk. Let us handle this. The argument continued for another 20 minutes, but eventually Justin conceded. He was trapped in my house, dependent on our willingness to act on his behalf. The role reversal wasn't lost on any of us. The successful son now relying on his mother and sister to save him. We slept in shifts that night. Diane took the guest room, Justin his old bedroom. and I dozed fitfully in my chair, listening for the sound of approaching vehicles. But the night remained quiet, broken only by the wind through the trees and the distant call of an owl. Dawn came gray and cold. Diane and I left at 6, driving my sedan south toward New Jersey. The trip took 3 hours, and we spent most of it in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. Margaret Mills lived in a small Cape Cod house on a street lined with similar structures, all built in the post-war boom and now showing their age. She answered the door with the wariness of someone who'd learned not to trust easily. "Mrs. Mills?" I offered my warmest smile. "I'm Bertha Hartwell, and this is my daughter Diane. We spoke with you yesterday about Cassandra." Her face softened slightly. "Come in." The interior was neat but dated, filled with the accumulated possessions of a long life. Photographs covered every available surface. Cassandra, at various ages, along with other family members I didn't recognize. "She was a good girl," Margaret said, gesturing us toward a floral couch. "Smart, principled, just like her grandfather." Her eyes misted. "They killed her for doing the right thing." "We believe that too," Diane said gently. "And we're trying to prove it. But we need your help. The police have already been here, asking questions about that lawyer, the one they say murdered her." Margaret's jaw tightened. "I told them they were wrong. Cassie trusted Mr. Hartwell. She wouldn't have trusted him if he was dangerous. Justin is my brother," Diane said. "And he's innocent. But someone is framing him, and we think Cassandra might have left evidence that could prove it." Margaret studied us both for a long moment. "She came to see me 2 weeks before she died. Brought a box, asked me to keep it safe, not to tell anyone about it." She stood slowly. "Wait here." She disappeared down the hallway, and Diane and I exchanged glances. This was it, the evidence that could unravel the entire frame. Margaret returned carrying a small fireproof lockbox. She said if anything happened to her, I should give this to someone I trusted, someone who would use it to make sure the people responsible paid. She held it out to me. "I think you're those people." I took the box with trembling hands. "Thank you. Make them pay," Margaret said, and her voice carried the weight of grief and rage. "Make them pay for taking my granddaughter." We drove to a nearby park before opening the box. Inside, we found 2 flash drives, a stack of printed financial documents, and a handwritten letter addressed, "To whoever finds this." Diane read the letter aloud. "If you're reading this, I'm probably dead. I'm writing this because I need someone to know the truth. Vertex Solutions has been embezzling money through shell companies for years. But it's worse than simple theft. The missing inventory, the drugs they claim were delivered, they're being sold on the black market, opioids mostly. Millions of pills ending up in illegal distribution networks. I have proof on these drives. Financial records, shipping manifests, emails between executives. Enough to put them away for decades. I gave copies to my attorney, Justin Hartwell, but I'm afraid they'll come after him too. James Farrell threatened me directly, said I didn't understand who I was dealing with, that people who crossed them had a way of disappearing. I'm scared, but I can't let them get away with this. Too many people are dying from these pills. I have to do the right thing, even if it costs me everything. Cassandra Mills, October 8th, 2024. The date was 5 days before her death. Diane immediately pulled out her laptop and connected one of the flash drives. What appeared on screen made her breath catch. "This is everything," she whispered. "Transaction records, shell company accounts, email chains discussing the diversion of controlled substances." She scrolled through files with increasing urgency. "This isn't just embezzlement. This is drug trafficking, federal charges, decades of prison time. Enough to kill for," I said quietly. "Enough to do much worse." She ejected the drive carefully. "We need to get this to the authorities immediately. The FBI, the DEA..." "No." The voice came from behind us. We both spun to find Lewis Sutton standing 10 feet away, a gun held casually at his side. "I'm afraid I can't let you do that, ladies." My heart hammered against my ribs. "How did you... follow you?" "I didn't. I tracked Margaret Mills's address from Cassandra's phone records and waited." He smiled without warmth. "I knew someone would eventually come looking for whatever she'd hidden. I just didn't expect it to be the suspect's family. You're working for them, Diane said, her voice steady despite the weapon. For Vertex. I'm working for people who pay well and don't appreciate loose ends. Sutton moved closer. Cassandra Mills was a loose end. Your brother became a convenient scapegoat. And now, unfortunately, you two have become liabilities. People know we're here, I said, though it was a lie. No one knows where you are. You drove separately from your fugitive son, took back roads, paid cash for gas. He held out his hand. The flash drives. Now. Diane clutched her laptop. If you kill us, it proves Justin is innocent. It proves nothing. 2 more unfortunate victims of a desperate murderer on the run. Maybe he forced you to help him, held you hostage. The narrative is flexible. His finger moved toward the trigger. The drives. Last chance. Time seemed to slow. I saw Diane's hand tighten on the laptop, saw her preparing to throw it, to create a distraction. But Sutton was too far away, too prepared. We were 2 women in an empty park facing an armed man with no compunction about killing. And then my phone rang. The sudden sound made everyone freeze. I pulled it from my purse with shaking hands and saw Justin's name on the screen. Don't answer it, Sutton commanded. I answered anyway. Justin? Mom, listen to me. His voice was rushed, urgent. I figured out how they cloned my phone and car. There's a mechanic shop near my office that does work for Vertex. They had access. Justin, I can't talk right now. I'm coming to get you. I tracked your phone. No! I nearly shouted it. Stay where you are. Do not come here. Mom, what's wrong? Sutton grabbed the phone from my hand and ended the call. Stupid. Now he knows something's wrong. He thinks we're in trouble. He'll call the police. Then we need to move quickly. He gestured with the gun. Into my car. Both of you. Bring the laptop and drives. We had no choice. Diane and I walked toward his black sedan, minds racing for options. If we got in that car, we were dead. Sutton would drive us somewhere remote and eliminate the evidence, all of it, including us. As we reached the vehicle, Diane stumbled, dropping her laptop. It clattered on the pavement, and Sutton instinctively glanced down. In that half-second of distraction, I grabbed my car keys and brought them down toward his gun hand while simultaneously shoving Diane away. Run! I screamed. Chaos erupted. The gun discharged, the bullet striking pavement. Diane sprinted toward a cluster of trees. Sutton cursed and backhanded me, sending me sprawling. I tasted blood, felt my vision blur. But I'd bought her seconds, maybe enough. Sutton started after Diane, then stopped. Through my dazed state, I heard sirens. Someone had called the police, maybe a park visitor who'd heard the shot, maybe Justin who'd managed to trace our location. Sutton looked at me, at the approaching sirens, at Diane disappearing into the trees. He made a decision. He ran. I lay on the cold pavement, breathing hard, watching his sedan peel out of the parking lot. Within minutes, 2 police cruisers arrived. Officers helped me sit up, called for an ambulance. Diane emerged from the trees, pale but unharmed, still clutching the laptop. We need to speak to whoever's in charge, she told the officers. We have evidence of murder, drug trafficking, and corporate conspiracy. And you need to put out an alert for Lewis Sutton. He's armed and extremely dangerous. As paramedics checked my injuries, a split lip, bruised ribs, nothing serious, I watched my daughter take control of the situation with the commanding presence of someone born to fight battles. She documented everything, explained everything, protected the evidence with fierce determination, and I realized that our family conflict was transforming into something else, something stronger. 3 hours later, we sat in a police station conference room with 2 FBI agents and a detective from the Philadelphia Police Department. Diane had connected her laptop to their system, and they were reviewing Cassandra's files with expressions that shifted from skepticism to shock to grim satisfaction. This is substantial, Agent Morrison said finally. Enough for warrants, raids, arrests. All 3 executives, plus however many others are involved. And Louis Sutton? I asked. We've issued a BOLO. Border Patrol has been alerted. He looked at me with something like respect. Mrs. Hartwell, you're lucky to be alive. I had good motivation. I glanced at Diane. We both did. By evening, the arrests had begun. Robert Kensington was taken into custody at his home. Patricia Wolfe at Vertex's offices. James Farrell tried to run and was apprehended at a private airfield, attempting to board a plane to Mexico. Louis Sutton remained at large. But the case against Justin collapsed immediately. The evidence on Cassandra's drives proved conclusively that Vertex executives had motive and means to kill her. Combined with Sutton's attempted murder of Diane and me, the district attorney had no choice but to drop all charges. Justin was free. We picked him up from my house after midnight, all three of us exhausted but victorious. My son stood in the driveway as we pulled up, and the expression on his face when he saw us was worth every bruise, every moment of fear. "It's over," Diane told him. "You're cleared." He pulled both of us into an embrace, and for the first time in years, we felt like a family again. But as we stood there under the stars, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't quite finished. Louis Sutton was still out there, and men like him didn't forgive witnesses who'd survived to testify. "Come inside," I said. "We have planning to do." Because the truth was clear. We'd won this battle, but the war might not be over. The FBI placed us in protective custody for 72 hours. Not a safe house exactly, more like supervised isolation in a hotel near Philadelphia where agents rotated shifts outside our rooms. Justin had one room, Diane another, and I took the third. We were told to stay put while they processed the evidence and located Louis Sutton. On the second day, Agent Morrison brought news. "We've identified Sutton's real background," he said, spreading files across the hotel room table where the three of us had gathered. "His name isn't Louis Sutton. It's Louis Kramer, former DEA agent who was dismissed 8 years ago for evidence tampering. He's been working as a private contractor since then. Corporate investigations, asset recovery, occasionally more questionable work." "How questionable?" Diane asked. 2 suspicious deaths associated with companies that employed him. Both ruled accidental. Both involved witnesses in fraud cases. Morrison's expression was grim. "We believe Vertex hired him specifically to handle the Cassandra Mills problem. When framing your brother didn't work fast enough, he was authorized to take more direct action." "Meaning he was sent to kill us?" I said flatly. "Yes, ma'am." Morrison pulled out another document. "We've frozen his bank accounts, tracked his known associates, and alerted every law enforcement agency on the eastern seaboard. But Kramer is experienced at disappearing. It may take time." "How much time?" Justin leaned forward. "Because my wife and daughter are still in Connecticut. If Kramer decides to use them as leverage, we have agents with them. They're safe." Morrison closed his folder. "The best thing you can do is stay here and let us work." But staying felt like waiting for a trap to spring. That night, unable to sleep, I found myself reviewing the files Morrison had left behind. The more I read about Louis Kramer, the more uneasy I became. This wasn't a man who gave up easily. He'd built a career on finishing what he started. At 2 a.m, my hotel phone rang. "Don't hang up, Mrs. Hartwell." The voice was calm, familiar, chilling. "Louis Kramer. I have a proposition for you." My hand tightened on the receiver. "How did you get this number?" "I have resources, more than your FBI friends realize." I heard traffic in the background. He was calling from a payphone, untraceable. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to convince your children to recant their testimony. Say they were mistaken, confused, that I never threatened you in the park." That's insane. What's insane is thinking you've won. The evidence you found? It's compelling, but it's not complete. I have the rest? Documents that implicate other people, including some of Cassandra's family members. Her uncle, for instance, was aware of the trafficking and took payments to look the other way. I felt my stomach drop. "You're lying." "Am I?" Margaret Mills's son, Cassandra's Uncle Thomas, works in pharmaceutical distribution. Very convenient, don't you think? The FBI will find transactions linking him to Vertex's operation. Anonymous tips will point investigators in his direction. His voice hardened. "Unless you cooperate, in which case those documents disappear, and a grieving old woman doesn't have to learn her son was complicit in her granddaughter's murder." "You want me to lie in exchange for covering up another crime?" "I want you to be smart. Vertex's executives are going down regardless. But I can walk away from this if you give me room to do so. Refuse, and I'll make sure Margaret Mills suffers just like you're making me suffer." He paused. "You have 24 hours to decide. I'll call back tomorrow night. Same time." The line went dead. I sat in the darkness, my mind racing. Was he bluffing? Did he actually have evidence against Cassandra's uncle? Or was this a desperate ploy? Either way, the threat was real. If I told the FBI, they'd intensify their search. But that might push Kramer to act immediately. If I kept quiet, I had time to verify his claims. But keeping quiet meant deceiving Agent Morrison and potentially endangering Margaret Mills. I made a decision I knew was dangerous, but couldn't avoid. I would investigate Kramer's claims myself. If Cassandra's uncle was truly involved, we needed to know before the FBI stumbled onto it and destroyed what was left of that family. And if Kramer was lying, I needed proof before exposing his manipulation. The next morning, I told Justin and Diane I was feeling claustrophobic and wanted to visit the hotel restaurant for breakfast alone. They accepted this. Barely, and I used the opportunity to slip out through a service entrance. The FBI agents were watching the main doors, not the kitchen access. I took a cab to a public library in Center City, Philadelphia, and used their computers to research Thomas Mills. What I found made my blood run cold. He did work in pharmaceutical distribution. For a company called Meridian Medical Supplies, one of the shell companies Cassandra had identified. He'd been employed there for 6 years, processing orders and managing inventory, the same inventory that had been diverted to black market sales. Either Thomas Mills was the most oblivious employee in history, or he'd known exactly what was happening. I dug deeper, searching for financial records, property transfers, anything that might indicate illicit payments. It took 3 hours, but I found them. Deposits into Thomas Mills's account, always in cash, always irregular amounts. $60,000 over 2 years. Kramer had been telling the truth. My phone buzzed with texts from Justin and Diane, increasingly frantic. Where was I? Why wasn't I answering? The FBI was looking for me. I silenced the phone and kept searching. There had to be more. Kramer wouldn't risk exposure just to protect Thomas Mills. There was something else, some deeper connection that made this worth fighting for. I found it in property records. Louis Kramer owned a cabin in the Pocono Mountains under his real name, but the purchase had been financed through a mortgage held by, I double-checked to be certain, Vertex Solutions' parent company. Kramer wasn't just a contractor. He was an asset, a permanent part of their operation, which meant he had information that could implicate people beyond the 3 executives currently in custody, people higher up the chain, people with more to lose, people who would pay well to make witnesses disappear. I was printing the property records when someone sat down beside me at the computer station. I looked up and found myself staring into the cold eyes of Louis Kramer. "You're a persistent woman, Mrs. Hartwell." He kept his voice low, conversational. I respect that, but persistence without wisdom is just stubbornness. My heart hammered, but I kept my expression calm. "We're in a public library. You're not going to risk..." "Risk what? Talking to you?" He smiled. "We're just 2 people having a conversation. Nothing threatening about that. The FBI is looking for you. They're looking in the wrong places." He glanced at my printed documents. "You found the cabin, found the connection. You're smart, I'll give you that, but you're missing the bigger picture." "Then enlighten me." Kramer leaned closer. Vertex Solutions is owned by a private equity firm called Harbinger Group. They own 17 pharmaceutical companies, 6 medical supply distributors, and have board members in 3 state legislatures. The opioid trafficking operation isn't isolated. It's systematic. Cassandra stumbled onto one small piece of a much larger network. I felt the air leave my lungs. How large? Millions of pills, hundreds of millions of dollars, operations in 8 states. His expression was almost admiring. She was a brave woman to go up against that. Foolish, but brave. And you killed her for it. I removed an obstacle. That's what I'm paid to do. He stood slowly. "Here's your choice, Mrs. Hartwell. You can give that information to the FBI and watch them spend years building cases that wealthy lawyers will dismantle. Vertex's executives will go to prison, yes, But the network will continue under different names, different people. Or you take the deal I offered. Recant your testimony about what happened in the park. I disappear. The evidence against Thomas Mills disappears. And Margaret Mills never has to know her son betrayed her granddaughter. He adjusted his jacket. You get to protect her, I get to survive. Everyone wins. Except justice. Justice? He laughed softly. Mrs. Hartwell, there is no justice. There's only what we can live with. And you need to decide what you can live with. Pursuing me and destroying what's left of Margaret Mills's family, or letting one guilty man go to spare an innocent woman more grief. He walked away before I could respond, disappearing into the stacks like smoke. I sat there, shaking, staring at the documents I'd printed. Everything he'd said was probably true. Thomas Mills was guilty. The Harbinger Group was likely real. And testifying against Kramer might indeed bring more pain to a woman who'd already lost everything. But letting him go meant letting a murderer walk free. I gathered my documents and called Agent Morrison. Mrs. Hartwell, where are you? I'm at the Central Library. Louis Kramer just confronted me. I heard him curse. I'm fine. He didn't hurt me. But I have information you need to see. Can you send someone? 20 minutes later, I was in an FBI vehicle being driven back to the hotel. Justin and Diane were waiting in the lobby, their expressions cycling between relief and fury. What were you thinking? Diane demanded. You could have been killed. I was thinking that Kramer called me last night and threatened Margaret Mills if we didn't recant our testimony. I handed Morrison the documents I'd printed, and I was thinking we needed to know if he was bluffing. Justin went pale. He called you? Mom, why didn't you? Because I needed to verify his claims before we acted. I met Morrison's eyes. Thomas Mills, Cassandra's uncle, is implicated in the trafficking operation. Kramer has evidence, and he's offered to make it disappear if we back down. Morrison reviewed the documents with increasing concern. This changes things. If Mills is involved, we need to move carefully. The family could sue, claim we're targeting them. The family is already targeted. I sat down heavily. Kramer's employers own a network of companies involved in systematic drug trafficking. Vertex was just one piece, and they have enough money and influence to make this very complicated. Which is why you should have told us immediately, Diane said sharply. Instead of playing investigator and putting yourself at risk. I did what needed to be done. You did what Dad would have done. Justin's voice was quiet, charged in without thinking about the consequences. The comparison stung because it was accurate. Thomas had been a firefighter, someone who ran toward danger while others fled. I'd always thought of myself as more cautious, more measured. But faced with a threat to my family, I'd defaulted to the same instincts. Maybe that's not always wrong, I said softly. Morrison closed the folder. We'll investigate Thomas Mills discreetly. But Mrs. Hartwell, you need to understand something. If Kramer calls again, you tell us immediately. No more solo investigations. This isn't a game. I know it's not a game. I thought of Cassandra Mills, of Margaret Mills grieving her granddaughter. People are dead. More will die if the Harbinger Group continues operating. I'm just trying to make sure my family isn't among them. That night, Kramer called again. This time, with Morrison listening on a traced line, I rejected his offer. I can't recant something that's true, I told him. You threatened us. You tried to kill us. And I won't protect Thomas Mills from his own choices. Then you've chosen Margaret's pain over her peace. His voice was cold. I hope you can live with that. I'll manage. I paused. But Kramer? The FBI knows about the Harbinger Group now, about the network. You might escape, but your employers won't. That empire is coming down. We'll see about that. The line went dead. Morrison removed his headphones with a grim expression. We got a location. He was calling from a truck stop in Delaware. We have units moving now. 2 hours later, they raided the location. Kramer was gone, but they found evidence. Documents, burner phones, a laptop with encrypted files. The noose was tightening, even if the target kept slipping through. This isn't over, Justin said as we watched the news coverage in the hotel room. No, I agreed. But we're not backing down. Diane looked at both of us, and I saw something shift in her expression. Pride, maybe, or recognition that her careful, methodical mother had become someone willing to face down killers and criminal networks. "Then we need a plan," she said. "A real one. Because Kramer's right about one thing. The Harbinger Group has resources we can't match. We need to be smarter than them. We also need to warn Margaret Mills," I added, "about her son. She deserves to know the truth, even if it destroys her." "I'll go," Justin offered. "She trusted me once. Maybe she will again. We'll all go." I stood, feeling my bruised ribs protest. Together, as a family, because that's what this had become. Not just Justin's fight, not just my protective instincts. This was about all of us standing against a system that crushed people like Cassandra Mills for daring to speak truth. And if that system wanted to crush us too, it would find we were harder to break than we looked. Outside the window, dawn was breaking over Philadelphia. A new day, with new dangers waiting, but also new opportunities to fight back. And I, Bertha Hartwell, was just getting started. The meeting with Margaret Mills happened 3 days later, after the FBI cleared us to travel under protective escort. We drove to her house in Trenton with 2 agents following at a discreet distance. The weight of what we had to tell her pressed down on all of us like a physical burden. Margaret answered the door looking older than she had just days before. Grief had carved new lines into her face, and her eyes held the exhaustion of someone who'd stopped sleeping. "Mr. Hartwell," she said, recognizing Justin. "And Mrs. Hartwell, Miss Hartwell. Please, come in." We sat in the same floral living room where Diane and I had received the lockbox. But this time, the photographs of Cassandra seemed to watch us with accusatory eyes. We were about to shatter what remained of this woman's world. Justin spoke first, his voice gentle but firm. "Mrs. Mills, we need to talk to you about your son Thomas." Her hands clutched the arms of her chair. "What about Thomas?" I took over, unable to let Justin carry this alone. "The investigation into Cassandra's death has revealed that the trafficking operation at Vertex Solutions was larger than we initially understood. And Margaret, I'm so sorry, but the evidence suggests Thomas was involved." The color drained from her face. "That's impossible. Thomas would never—" "He worked for Meridian Medical Supplies," Diane said quietly, pulling out documents. "That company was a front for diverting pharmaceutical drugs to illegal markets. Thomas processed many of the orders, and he received substantial cash payments over 2 years." "No." Margaret shook her head violently. "No, you're wrong. Thomas would have told Cassandra. He would have helped her. Maybe he didn't know at first," Justin offered. "Maybe he discovered it later and felt trapped. But Mrs. Mills, the evidence is clear, and the FBI is going to arrest him." She started to cry, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. I moved to sit beside her, taking her hand, letting her grief pour out. We'd known this would destroy her. We'd done it anyway, because she deserved the truth. When she could finally speak, her voice was barely a whisper. "Does he know you've found out?" "Not yet," I said. "But he will soon. The FBI is coordinating arrests across multiple states. They're moving against everyone involved with the Harbinger Group." "Harbinger Group?" She looked up. "What's that?" Diane explained while Margaret listened with growing horror. "The scope of the conspiracy, the systematic trafficking, the millions of pills flooding communities across the eastern seaboard. Her son hadn't just betrayed his niece. He'd been part of an operation that had killed countless people through addiction and overdoses." "I need to talk to him," Margaret said finally. "Before the FBI comes, I need to hear him say it." "That's not advisable," Justin began, but I squeezed Margaret's hand. "We'll arrange it," I said. "One conversation, supervised. But you deserve that much." The FBI agreed, reluctantly. 2 days later, they brought Thomas Mills to a secure location, a conference room in a federal building where family meetings with suspects could be monitored. Margaret sat on one side of a table, Thomas on the other, with agents watching through one-way glass. We weren't supposed to be there, but I'd convinced Agent Morrison to let us observe from the monitoring room. I needed to see this, needed to understand how a man could betray his own niece for money. Thomas Mills was 48, overweight, with thinning hair and the defeated posture of someone who knew his life was over. He couldn't meet his mother's eyes. "Did you know?" Margaret asked without preamble. "Did you know what Cassandra discovered?" A long silence. Then, quietly, "Yes." Margaret's composure cracked. "How could you? She was your niece, your family. I tried to warn her." His voice rose defensively. "I told her to drop it, to let it go. But she wouldn't listen. She said people were dying, that she had to do the right thing." He laughed bitterly. "The right thing. Like it's that simple." "It is that simple." Margaret's voice could have cut steel. "You chose money over your niece's life. I chose to keep my house, keep my job, keep my family from losing everything." He finally looked at her. "I wasn't stealing. I was just processing orders. I didn't know where they were going at first, and by the time I figured it out, I was already implicated. They had evidence against me. Farrell made that very clear. James Farrell threatened you. He gave me a choice: keep quiet and get paid, or go to prison for conspiracy." Thomas's hands trembled. "I have 2 kids in college, Mom. A mortgage. I couldn't just throw that away." "So you let them kill Cassandra instead." "I didn't know they would kill her." His voice cracked. "I thought they'd just discredit her, pay her off, something. When I heard she was dead, He broke down, sobbing. "I wanted to tell the police, but by then I was in too deep. They would have blamed me too." Margaret stood slowly. "You're not my son anymore. I have 1 child now, and she's dead because you were a coward." She walked out without looking back, leaving Thomas weeping at the table. In the monitoring room, we stood in silence. There was nothing to say that would make this better. Margaret Mills had lost both her son and her granddaughter. One to murder, one to greed and fear. "She's stronger than she looks," Diane murmured. "She'll have to be," I replied. "This is just beginning." Agent Morrison entered the monitoring room with urgent energy. "We have a situation. Louis Kramer has contacted our field office. He wants to negotiate a deal." Justin stood abruptly. "What kind of deal?" "Full testimony against the Harbinger Group's leadership in exchange for witness protection and reduced charges." Morrison pulled out his phone, showing us an email. "He claims to have evidence that goes all the way to their board of directors. Names, transactions, communications, everything." "It's a trap," I said immediately. "Probably. But if he actually has what he claims, he's a murderer." Diane's voice was sharp. "He killed Cassandra Mills and tried to kill us. Why would we trust anything he says? Because we might not have a choice." Morrison looked at each of us. "Vertex's executives are facing charges, but the Harbinger Group's board has enough lawyers to stall this for years. If Kramer can give us direct evidence, we can shut down the entire operation. At the cost of letting him walk free," Justin said bitterly. "At the cost of preventing more deaths, more Cassandras." Morrison's expression was grim. "It's not ideal, but it might be necessary." "When does he want to meet?" I asked. "Tomorrow. Neutral location, his choice. He'll only deal with one person." Morrison paused. "He specifically requested Mrs. Hartwell." The room went silent. "Absolutely not," Justin and Diane said in unison. "I agree," Morrison added. "It's too dangerous." But I was already thinking it through. Kramer wanted me because I was the weakest link physically, easier to control, easier to threaten. But I was also the one who'd faced him twice and survived, the one who'd proven unpredictable. "I'll do it," I said. "Mom, no, I'll do it," I repeated louder. "But not the way Kramer expects. I have conditions." Morrison listened as I outlined my plan. It was risky, possibly reckless, but it played to my strengths: patience, observation, and the fact that everyone underestimated a 64-year-old grandmother. The meeting was set for the following afternoon at a restaurant in Wilmington, Delaware. Public enough to discourage violence, remote enough for Kramer to feel secure. I wore a wire, had a tracking device in my shoe, and knew FBI agents would be positioned throughout the building. I also had something Kramer didn't know about. For the past 3 days, while we'd been dealing with Margaret Mills and Thomas's arrest, I'd been conducting my own investigation. Small things, subtle inquiries. I'd called in favors from my years as a librarian. contacted people who specialized in finding information that others wanted hidden. And I'd found something that changed everything. Kramer was already seated when I arrived, in a corner booth with clear sightlines to all exits. He stood as I approached, still playing the gentleman even now. "Mrs. Hartwell, thank you for coming. I didn't have much choice, did I?" I slid into the booth across from him, keeping my hands visible on the table. "You have something the FBI wants. I have leverage. There's a difference." He poured water from a pitcher, the gesture almost domestic. "I assume you're wired?" "Of course." "Good. I want them to hear this." He leaned forward. "The Harbinger Group is run by 5 board members. I have documentation linking all of them to the trafficking operation. Emails, financial transfers, meeting notes, enough to guarantee federal charges. And in exchange, you get immunity, reduced charges, witness protection, a chance to start over somewhere quiet." He smiled thinly. "I'm tired, Mrs. Hartwell. Tired of being the person who does terrible things so others can keep their hands clean. I want out. You want forgiveness. I want survival." He pushed an envelope across the table. "That contains a sample of what I have, enough to prove I'm legitimate. The rest comes after we have an agreement." I didn't touch the envelope. Instead, I pulled out my own folder, the one I'd compiled over the past 3 days. "I did some research too," I said quietly. "About you. About your past." His expression didn't change, but I saw tension enter his shoulders. "You had a daughter once," I continued. "Sarah Kramer. She died 7 years ago. Opioid overdose. She was 23. Now his facade cracked. "That's none of your business." "She bought pills from a dealer who got them from a trafficking network run by pharmaceutical companies. Companies diverting legally manufactured drugs to illegal markets." I met his eyes. "Companies like the ones you've been protecting." "Shut up. You became what killed her. You helped the same kind of operation that destroyed your family." I opened my folder, showing him documents I'd obtained through public records and careful investigation. The Harbinger Group started their trafficking operation 8 years ago, right after you were dismissed from the DEA, and you were one of their first contractors. His hands clenched into fists. "You don't know anything. I know you spent 2 years trying to find who sold your daughter the pills that killed her. I know you eventually tracked the supply chain back to a network operating in 3 states, and I know you stopped investigating when someone offered you money to look the other way." I leaned forward. "How much did they pay you, Lewis? How much was your daughter's memory worth?" He moved so fast I barely saw it, his hand shooting across the table to grab my wrist. But FBI agents were already converging, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Kramer froze, then slowly released me and raised his hands. "I was trying to survive," he said, his voice hollow. "I'd lost everything. My job, my daughter, my marriage. They offered me a way to keep going. By helping them do to other families what they did to yours. By doing what I had to do." But there was no conviction in his words, only exhaustion. Agent Morrison pulled me away from the booth while other agents secured Kramer. I stood there, shaking slightly, watching this broken man who'd killed and threatened and terrorized, all in service of the very system that had destroyed his life. "Did you know about his daughter?" Morrison asked quietly. I suspected. It was the only thing that made sense. Why else would a former DEA agent work for drug traffickers? I looked at the envelope Kramer had brought. "Is his evidence real?" Morrison checked. His expression shifted. "It's real. Enough for warrants on all 5 board members. Then use it. Shut them down." I turned toward the exit. "And make sure Louis Kramer never sees the outside of a prison again. He doesn't deserve forgiveness. He deserves to live with what he's become." Outside, Justin and Diane were waiting with more agents. My son pulled me into a fierce embrace. "Don't ever do that again," he whispered. "I won't need to." I stepped back, looking at both my children. "It's over. Really over, this time." "How did you find out about Kramer's daughter?" Diane asked. "Library science." I smiled slightly. People forget that librarians are trained researchers. We know how to find information, how to connect dots that others miss. I just applied those skills to something more important than helping patrons find books. That evening, we watched the news coverage from a hotel room as FBI agents arrested all 5 Harbinger Group board members. The pharmaceutical trafficking network that had operated for nearly a decade was dismantled in a coordinated sweep across 8 states. The reporters called it the largest pharmaceutical fraud case in modern history. I called it justice for Cassandra Mills. "What happens now?" Justin asked. "For us, I mean?" "Now?" I considered the question. "Now you rebuild your law practice. Fight for clients who need you. Diane goes back to Boston, hopefully without so much anger at the world. And I go home to my farm and try to remember what a normal life feels like. After everything that's happened, I'm not sure any of us can go back to normal," Diane said. "Then we'll find a new normal." I stood, feeling every one of my 64 years. "But we'll do it together, as a family, because that's what this ordeal had given us, despite everything. A reminder that family wasn't about perfection or agreement. It was about standing together when everything fell apart. And we had stood, survived, triumphed. Not through violence or luck, but through intelligence, patience, and the quiet strength that comes from refusing to back down when facing impossible odds. Louis Kramer had underestimated me. The Harbinger Group had underestimated my family. They wouldn't make that mistake again. But then again, they wouldn't get the chance. The empire they'd built on suffering and greed was ash now, and we had struck the match. One ordinary family against a criminal network. And we had won. 6 weeks later, I stood in my kitchen making coffee as dawn broke over the farmland. The same kitchen where Justin had arrived in desperate flight, where our ordeal had begun. But everything felt different now. Lighter, somehow. As if the house itself had exhaled after holding its breath. The legal proceedings had moved with surprising speed. Louis Kramer pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, conspiracy, and attempted murder in exchange for his testimony against the Harbinger Group. He would spend the rest of his life in prison without possibility of parole. The board members faced federal charges that would likely keep them incarcerated for decades. Thomas Mills accepted a plea bargain, 15 years for his role in the trafficking operation. Margaret Mills had attended his sentencing, but left without speaking to him. Some betrayals carved too deep for forgiveness. Justin's name had been cleared completely. The district attorney issued a public apology, and several news outlets ran stories about the attorney who'd been framed for standing up to corporate corruption. His practice had seen an influx of new clients. Whistleblowers, mostly. People who'd seen what happened and wanted representation from someone who understood the risks. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Through the window, I saw Rachel's car in the driveway. My daughter-in-law had come alone without Emma. This would be a difficult conversation. I opened the door to find her looking thinner than I remembered, with dark circles under her eyes. She'd spent 6 weeks believing her husband might be a murderer, then learning he'd been innocent all along. That kind of doubt didn't heal quickly. "Bertha," she managed to smile. "Thank you for seeing me. Come in. Coffee? Please." We sat at the kitchen table where so many crucial conversations had taken place. Rachel wrapped her hands around her mug as if drawing warmth from it. "I owe you an apology," she said finally. "I should have believed in Justin. Should have stood by him instead of running. You were protecting your daughter. I can't fault you for that. But I abandoned him when he needed me most. And you?" Her voice caught. "You risked everything to prove his innocence. You could have been killed. I did what mothers do. We protect our children, even when they're grown." I sipped my coffee. "Are you here to decide whether to go back to him?" Rachel nodded slowly. "Part of me wants to. I love him, Bertha. I always have. But the other part keeps remembering those weeks when I looked at him and saw a stranger. Someone capable of murder. How do I get past that? By remembering that you were lied to by people who were very good at lying. They created evidence, manufactured a narrative, manipulated circumstances. The fact that you believed it doesn't mean you're weak or disloyal. It means they were effective. Justin says the same thing, but I can see it in his eyes. He's hurt that I doubted him. Of course he is, but hurt can heal if you both want it to." I set down my mug. "Rachel, do you want your marriage to survive?" "Yes," she whispered, "but I don't know if it can." "Then you work at it. You both acknowledge the damage, Commit to rebuilding trust and you give it time. There's no quick fix, no magic solution. Just two people choosing each other every day until it becomes easier. I reached across the table to squeeze her hand. And if you need support, you have family who will help you through it. She left an hour later, looking marginally more hopeful. Whether she and Justin would rebuild their marriage remained uncertain, but at least they were trying. Sometimes trying was enough. Diane arrived that afternoon, her rental car packed with luggage. She'd taken a leave of absence from her Boston firm to stay with me for a few weeks. Something about needing space to think about her career, her life, her choices. "The guest room is ready," I told her as she carried in her suitcase. "Actually, I was thinking I might stay longer than a few weeks." She set the luggage down and turned to face me. "How would you feel about a semi-permanent roommate?" I studied my daughter's face, seeing vulnerability there I hadn't noticed before. "What happened in Boston?" "Nothing dramatic. No scandal. No crisis." She moved to the window, looking out at the fields. "But after everything that happened here, after watching you face down killers and dismantle criminal networks using nothing but research skills and determination, I went back to my office and realized I was miserable. You have a successful career. I have a job that pays well and impresses people at cocktail parties. But it doesn't mean anything." She turned back to me. "I spend my days helping corporations avoid liability and minimize losses. I'm good at it. But is that what I want to do with my life? Help rich people get richer while avoiding consequences?" I gestured to the living room, and we sat together on the couch where she'd spent countless childhood evenings reading and doing homework. "What would you rather do?" I asked. "I don't know yet, but I'd like to figure it out here if you'll have me. Maybe I could volunteer with legal aid organizations, help people who actually need representation. Maybe I could teach." She smiled ruefully. "Or maybe I'll discover I'm meant to be a farmer." "You'd hate farming." "Probably. But the point is, I have space here to figure it out. And I've missed you, Mom. We lost so much time being distant and professional with each other. I don't want to waste more." I pulled her into an embrace, feeling tears prick my eyes. "You can stay as long as you need. The house is big enough for both of us. And Justin, when he visits. And Justin." I pulled back to look at her. "We're family. We make room." Over the following weeks, we established new rhythms. Diane set up a small office in what had been Thomas's old study, taking on pro bono cases for clients who couldn't afford representation. Justin visited most weekends, sometimes with Rachel and Emma, sometimes alone. The tension between him and Rachel was gradually easing, though I suspected it would be months before they fully recovered. Margaret Mills called one evening, asking if she could visit. I agreed immediately, and 2 days later she arrived with a basket of muffins and a determined expression. "I wanted to thank you," she said as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, "for everything you did, for finding the truth, even when it destroyed my family. I'm sorry about Thomas. Don't be. He made his choices, and now he's living with them." She broke apart a muffin without eating it. "I've been thinking about starting a foundation, in Cassandra's name. Something to help whistleblowers, protect people who expose corporate corruption. I have some money saved, and the life insurance from Cassandra's death. I'd like to use it for something that would make her proud." "That's a beautiful idea. I was hoping you might help. You and your children. You understand what it takes to stand up to powerful people." She looked at me directly. "I know I'm not family, but you fought for my granddaughter like she was yours. That means something. We'd be honored to help." And so another thread wove into the tapestry of our new normal. The Cassandra Mills Foundation began taking shape. A small operation at first, but growing. Diane handled the legal framework. Justin provided counsel on whistleblower protections, and I managed the administrative work. It gave purpose to our trauma, turned suffering into something productive. 3 months after the arrests, I received a letter from Louis Kramer. The prison return address made my stomach tighten, but I opened it anyway. "Mrs. Hartwell, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that what you said in that restaurant changed something in me. You were right. I became what killed my daughter. I spent years telling myself I was just surviving, just doing what was necessary. But I was really punishing myself by destroying other families the way mine was destroyed. I've been thinking about Sarah a lot, remembering who she was before the addiction, before everything went wrong. She was kind. She volunteered at animal shelters and wanted to be a veterinarian. She would have hated what I became. You reminded me of that. You made me see myself clearly for the first time in years. I'm not writing this to make you feel sorry for me. I'm writing because you deserve to know that your words mattered, that facing what I'd done mattered. I'll spend the rest of my life in prison. That's appropriate. But I'll spend it trying to be someone Sarah wouldn't be ashamed of. I'm working with prosecutors, providing information on other trafficking networks. It won't bring back the people who died because of what I did, but maybe it will prevent future deaths. Thank you for seeing me as more than just a monster, even though I was one. Louis Kramer. I read the letter twice, then filed it away. I didn't forgive him. Forgiveness wasn't mine to give. That belonged to Cassandra's family, to all the families destroyed by the drugs he'd helped traffic. But I acknowledged that people could change, even damaged ones, even those who'd done terrible things. Spring arrived, bringing renewal to the farm. I planted a garden, something I hadn't done in years, and found the rhythm of working with soil and seeds surprisingly therapeutic. Justin helped when he visited, and Emma learned to identify vegetables and pull weeds. One Saturday afternoon, the three of us worked together in the garden while Rachel watched from the porch. Emma was 6 now, full of questions about why her father had been in hiding, why they'd lived with Grandma Rachel for so long. We answered carefully, explaining that sometimes bad people try to hurt good people, but family protects each other. Like Grandma Bertha protected Daddy, Emma said, patting soil around a tomato plant. Exactly like that, Justin agreed. I want to be like Grandma Bertha when I grow up. I laughed, my hands deep in the earth. You can aim higher than that, sweetheart. No, I mean it. She looked at me with serious eyes. You're brave. You fight bad guys with your brain instead of guns. That's the best kind of superhero. Justin met my eyes over his daughter's head, and I saw pride there. Not just in me, but in the values we were passing to the next generation. That standing up for truth mattered. That wisdom and patience could overcome brute force. That age didn't diminish worth. It enhanced it. That evening, after everyone had left, I stood on the porch watching the sun set over my land. The same land Thomas and I had bought 40 years ago with dreams of raising a family. He'd been gone for 3 years now, but I felt his presence in the settled peace of the moment. We did all right, I told him silently. The kids turned out strong, flawed, but strong. The farmhouse behind me held 3 generations of memories now. Arguments and reconciliations, laughter and tears, ordinary moments and extraordinary crises. It had witnessed a family fracture and rebuild, had sheltered a son fleeing false accusations, had become the headquarters for dismantling a criminal empire. It was just a house, wood and brick and mortar, but it was also a legacy. A reminder that safety didn't come from hiding or running or giving up. It came from standing firm, thinking clearly, and refusing to let fear dictate choices. I was 64 years old. For too long, I'd thought of that as a limitation, a mark of decline, a signal that my most important years were behind me. But the past 3 months had taught me otherwise. Age wasn't weakness. It was accumulated wisdom, hard-won perspective, and the confidence to trust my instincts. The young charged forward with energy and certainty, but sometimes the biggest battles required someone who knew how to wait, observe, and strike with precision instead of force. Someone who understood that the quietest voice in the room might be the most dangerous. Someone like me. Diane emerged from the house carrying 2 glasses of wine. Thought you might want company. Always. I accepted the glass and clinked it against hers. To survival. To more than survival. She smiled. To building something better from the wreckage. We drank to that, standing together in the fading light. Mother and daughter, different in temperament and approach, but united in purpose. Behind us, the farmhouse waited, solid, enduring, ready for whatever came next. The story that had begun with a desperate son arriving at 3 a.m. had ended with a family transformed. We'd been tested and hadn't broken. We'd faced corruption, violence, and impossible odds, and we'd prevailed. Not through luck, Not through miracles, through intelligence, determination, and the kind of strength that only comes from living long enough to understand that power takes many forms. The powerful had tried to crush us, but they'd forgotten that roots grow deep, and what looks fragile on the surface might be unbreakable underneath. I was Bertha Hartwell, grandmother, retired librarian, protector of her family, and I'd proven that 64 years of life had taught me everything I needed to know about fighting battles and winning wars. The farmhouse lights glowed warm behind us as darkness settled over the land. Home, safety, legacy, everything worth fighting for, everything we'd protected, everything that would endure. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.